Good morning, friends. As part of Hadoop administration training, so far we have seen how to provision EC2 instances, then set up M repository server, then we set up Ambari, using which we set up Ambari or Cloudera Manager, and then we set up the agents on all of them, and we installed Zookeeper HDFS, and we have seen Classic MRV1 or Classic, and we are in the process of understanding MRV2. So far, we have understood how to set up the Yarn plus MRV2 on the cluster, and then we have validated how it can be monitored at the service level. Now we will see we need to validate by running a job as well, and then we need to understand how the job will be executed and how to troubleshoot if there are any issues, etc. So for that, we'll be using Hadoop examples.jar file. So this is the command which I typically use to search for the Hadoop examples. Whatever distribution we have, typically administrators will have sudo permissions, and we can use this sudo find command in any environment. So this is the jar file which I will be using to test. Okay, and this jar file comes from Apache Hadoop, not from Hortonworks or Cloudera. So once you know where this examples.jar file is, you can use that to test on any node in the cluster. So here, let me see the capacity before running the command du minus df minus s. So df is the command which will give us the free space on the cluster. So it has pretty much everything. Only 6.3 gigabytes is used. We have 120 gigabytes of storage in this. So we'll be running this one to generate random data using an application called Random Text Writer, which is part of this jar file. Okay, for that, first you need to make sure that you have the directory to which you want to write, or which you want to give as output path to the script. To the command of Hadoop jar. Hadoop jar is the command to submit the jobs, and then use the jar file and random text writer. If you are not sure about what should be used, you just type Hadoop jar and this jar file and hit enter. It will show all the applications that are available, and then you can actually run that command to understand the usage of that command. Run the application to understand the usage of the application. Here random text writer randomly generates some text data and dump into the output directory, so it takes only one parameter. So I will be giving user ec2 hyphen user, and when you typically run these MapReduce applications, unless you are unless the development team customized in such a way that the directories which are specified as output path are managed, then you have to give non-existent directory. So user ec2 user is the path under which I want to create the output directory for this application. So the directory which I want to use is random text writer, and here you can see that that directory does not exist. Okay, and then hit enter. Okay, it will take a while because it will try to generate 10 gigabytes of data for each of the data node, and this cluster have 3 data nodes, and hence it actually create 30 gigabytes of data. Now the job is running, and if you see, it has given a URL over here. Okay, so I am using AWS. If you have already set up cluster, you should be knowing about tunneling and Foxy proxy by now. So you have to use the tunneling to access these IP addresses in AWS, which starts with IP. They are actually private IPs, and we cannot directly directly use them. So if I just copy this URL and run this in the browser, it will not come up. So what you have to do is you have to first open a new tab, and then earlier I have ran ssh-a command. Now I have to say nd8157. Okay, that is the port number. EC2-user is the username, and the gateway node of our cluster. The gateway node is the Bastion server for my HDP cluster. For my Cloudera cluster, it was master01. So use this one, and as long as it is hung, the tunneling is going on. And then I will be using Firefox because I have set up Firefox already, Foxy proxy for Firefox already. For Chrome I haven't set up Foxy proxy, hence I will be using a Firefox browser for this. Now go back to here, get this IP address and paste it over here. Before that you have to go to tools, Foxy proxy standard, and this one, use Foxy proxy for the EMR URLs. Then you will see this blue icon, and then you can run this. Okay, this is called as whatever I have done in the terminal is called as SSH tunneling, and in the browser it is called as Foxy proxy. Okay, so you have to use both to access the web servers that are running on the cluster. So it seems 11 are running. It seems they are not progressing. Let me check what is going on. Yeah, it is progressing. It is very slow because we are doing too much with the limited capacity. Okay, now you can see that some of the process are actually getting the data. Okay, so anyway, let me go back and start from the beginning. So copy this once SSH tunneling is started and Foxy proxy is enabled, and paste it over here. Okay, and this will take you to the job directly, job ID, and if you click on this you will get the tasks and related to this. This is a map only job, there won't be reducers for this, and you can see the maps are being in pending state. Some of them are in pending state, some of them are in running state, and some of them are in completed state. If you directly go to the resource manager web interface instead of the job ID, if you go to the resource manager web interface using 8088 port number, you can see under tracking URI application master. So as I have explained earlier, let me show. So as I have explained earlier, when the job is started, not this one. Yeah, this is the one. When the job is started using yarn, what will happen is the job request will go to the resource manager, and then it will check with all the node managers. We have 3 node managers because we have 3 slaves, and it will pick one of the node manager and it will create application master, and the job management will be delegated to application master. From there, application master will start with node managers and try to kick off the containers which runs mapper tasks and reducer tasks. This is in contrast to the classic. The job management will not be done by one of the process on the slaves. The job management will be done by the job tracker itself. That is why the job tracker can become contention on a larger cluster. Okay, and that's why in yarn they have decoupled the resource management and job management, and resource manager is only responsible for the resource management at the cluster level. Per job management is delegated to application master. Okay, and now if you see here, there is a URL for application master, because they are giving a tracking UI for each of the job like this. Uh, the application master might run on any of the slave nodes. With the job tracker, the job management is done by one server, so the URL will be same for all. So if you click on this application master, if you see, this is taken to proxy. So this proxy is configured as part of the setting up of the cluster. So irrespective of wherever this application is running, we will channel through one centralized URL which will be running on the resource manager itself. Even though we are getting this information from this from the same IP as the resource manager, internally it is actually going to the node where the application master is running. If you want to get the details about where the application master is running, click on this one. So if you click on the right side, it will take you to the job level details. If you click on this one, it will take you to where the application master is running. So this is the node where the application master is running. And if we go to Ambari and go to hosts, and click on these 22 components and scroll down, resource manager is running on this one 39, but our application master is running on 40. Okay, so this is the one which will control the so whatever process that is running on this node, further job will be controlling the job management. So it will negotiate with the node managers to understand how much capacity is there on each of the node manager and try to submit the jobs. Okay, and also when you go to the resource manager web interface using the IP address of the resource manager and port number 8088. So this is the home page, and here earlier I have shown you the memory and vCores on Cloudera cluster. Now I am showing on Horton cluster. You can see total there is only 6 GB of memory allocated for all the 3 node managers on this cluster. So ideally it should be higher. I will fine tune it later. That's why it is taking a lot of time to complete this job compared to Cloudera cluster. In Cloudera cluster, the parameters are fine tuned to use all the capacity on each of the nodes in the cluster. Similarly, vCores also, if you see, it is only 9, whereas there it's a lot more, I think 16 or something. So these are the ones which will actually control the performance of the cluster, how many number of mappers and reducers can run when you configure the cluster with YARN. Okay, unless you practice, you will not be able to gain this much of amount of knowledge, and you will not be able to face the interviews. So you have to set up the cluster, you have to run the job, you need to understand how the capacity is associated with the jobs. Then only you will be able to take it to next level. You have to perform hands-on. I'm not sure how many of you guys are actually performing hands-on. You have to build the cluster. You have to first use your virtual machines to build the cluster. Once you are comfortable with Linux and setting up the once you are comfortable with Linux and setting up cluster using Linux on 4 nodes, then you should consider setting up cluster on 7 nodes or 8 nodes in AWS, and you can even claim it as POC. You are doing it at your own expense, and you can actually claim it as POC, and you can market yourself more aggressively after building that. And then you should be able to extrapolate the knowledge which you gain with these two efforts. First one, to set up the cluster locally, and then set up the cluster on AWS. Once you understand the memory and the storage which you are trying to use and all those things, you will be able to extrapolate to a very large number, and from there it will be very straightforward. If you don't perform hands-on, then it will be very tough. Anyway, so as the job is running, you can click on the application master, and the way you should troubleshoot the issue is, Here you can see there are 30 maps which are already completed, and all of them are successful. Once it is completed, you can see it has gone through job history server. Okay, so when the job is running, the details will come only through application master, because application master is the one managing the job. Once the job is completed, all the logs related to that job will be copied to HDFS, and from that HDFS job history server will pull the data for you and will provide the details about the jobs that are already completed. Okay, so the location where these job history will be stored is, again, depending upon the distribution and depending upon certain configuration parameters, the location might change. You can say Hadoop FS minus ls. Typically, it will be under /user/history. I guess there is no /history here. Let me see. Yeah, this is the location, mr-history. For Cloudera cluster, it is /user/history. For Hortonworks, the default location is /mr-history. So there will be a parameter file which will control this. So that's why you see different behavior between Hortonworks and Cloudera. And now if you say Hadoop FS minus ls mr history and hit enter, you can see there is a directory called done here. So the way you can actually search is Hadoop FS -ls -R. So take this job ID. Sorry, I did wrong. So recursively search for this mr history done, and then pipe it to grep for this job ID. Okay. So you can see this is the location where you will have the details about the job. Okay, and also you can see there is some other file which will actually store the information. You don't need to get into the details. The only thing you need to understand is, once the job is completed, the logs will be dumped into HDFS, and from HDFS job history server will start showing the details. And then to troubleshoot the issue, you can click on map or reduce whatever tasks you are seeing failed. So if there are failed, you will see a URL over here. You can click on that and it will actually go to only the failed tasks, and you can start troubleshooting. Failed or killed. This is for failed, and this is for killed, and this is for successful. So let's say one of them is failed, and if you want to check the logs, you can click on the logs here, and it will take you to this page. And here you will see the log. Sometimes it will be collapsed, and you will have a link here to see the full log, and you have to click on that and go to the details to troubleshoot the issues. So this is how you should troubleshoot the issues. And as part of this effort, we have validated that we are able to generate the text randomly by running MapReduce job, and store the output under user ec2-user random text writer. So this is the main intention why we have started. After setting up the cluster, we want to validate whether we are able to submit the jobs or not, and you have to do it. Most of the times when you set up for the first time, people tend to turn out the cluster to developers saying that cluster setup is successful. It is highly important that you validate each and every component before turning out to the development team or production team, production support team, whatever team it is. When you add the components, first you have to validate by performing all kinds of tasks. We should be sure that we should make sure that there are no errors in the logs for the service level, and also we can actually submit some jobs here. Then only we should turn out to the developers. That is the best practice which you should follow. Okay. So I have covered this also. Understand web interface, resource manager, job history, per job application master, Ambari. Everything is covered. If it is Cloudera, the only difference will be in the interface of this one. In Ambari you will see like this. In Cloudera you will see a little bit different. I have explained several times in the past, so I am not getting into details here. Okay. So I am expecting Ratan to join, but he didn't join for some reason. That's fine. So the next thing, it is done. So this is also explained. So this is how it will look like. So if there are multiple jobs submitted at the same time, so one is purple job and one is pink job. So both requests go through resource manager, and from resource manager it will actually first talk to the existing node managers, look to see the capacity available in the cluster, and then first it will create the application master. For pink there is a application master on this node. For purple there is the application master on this node, and depending upon the tasks they need to execute, they will talk to the node managers and try to create the containers. For MapReduce, the containers will execute mapper tasks and reducer tasks. If it is Spark based job, then the container will execute something else. So depending upon the tool you are using to execute, it will execute task related to tool as part of these containers. For MapReduce, the containers will execute map tasks and reduce tasks. So yeah, fault tolerance I have covered at the time of discussing with the Classic. Most of the features are same. Task value is dealt in the similar fashion as with Classic. So if, for example, if when we run this job, if one of the tasks fails on one of the nodes, so here there are 30 tasks. Okay, so if one of the job failed on one of the nodes, it will retry the same job on some other node. Okay, if data is available locally when it retried on some other node, it will leverage the data locality, perform the IO and execute the job. If the blocks related to the task which is failed over to the other node is not available, then it will look at the other nodes wherever the data is available and fetch that data, and it will start processing. It will not wait until the capacity is available on the nodes where blocks are available. Okay, so it can compromise data locality when it try to fail over. So it will retry 4 times, and after 4 times also, if it fails, that means it will assume that it is due to some bug in the code and it will give up. Okay, so typically this retry mechanism is primarily to overcome the hardware failures, not the bugs in the code. So that's why when it fail over, always it fail over on a different node which it didn't try before. So if it retries 4 times, it will retry on 4 different nodes to write off any hardware related issues that is causing problem for the jobs. But even after 4 retries, which is default, if the tasks are failing, that means there is something wrong with the code and it will give up, and you need to troubleshoot and fix the issue. And if it fails due to hardware failure, and if one of the node is if there is a hardware failure on one of the node, and if there are too many failures happening on that node, then that application master, which is not the application master, node manager, on the node manager on the node where it is failing too much will be blacklisted, and it will not be used by the resource manager to submit jobs anymore. When it comes to application master, if application master fails, that means there is an issue with the job, so it will actually retry the entire job on a separate node. So it will kill all the tasks that are being executed, and it will ignore the tasks that are already successfully executed, and it will fail over the job to a different node because application master actually perform the job management. If it fails, then the job itself will be failed. So typically we will not retry the application master, but it can be controlled by this parameter, and resource manager application master max retries. If you set to 2, it will retry twice before giving up. And typically we need to enable this if we want to overcome the hardware failures, because the bugs in the code does not impact application master at all. And then resource manager failure, all the probability of resource manager failure is relatively low. The reason is resource manager is doing a lot lesser job compared to job tracker in classic. Job tracker in classic performs both the resource management as well as job management, and job management is takes a lot more overhead compared to resource management. So as the job management is delegated to the application masters running on multiple nodes in the cluster for each job, the failure of resource manager will be relatively low, because it is only performing the resource management, not the job management. But still, if it fails, no jobs can be submitted until resource manager is brought back up and running. However, we can actually configure high availability in Yarn, which means there will be multiple resource manager running on the cluster. And it's very easy to set up. You can go through the videos and you will understand how to set up resource manager high availability. Okay, so now let's compare the classic and Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2. So Hadoop 1, I have not covered Hadoop 1 at all, because now most of the clusters is Hadoop 2. But still, you should be aware of what are the major differences between Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2. We have already spoken about HDFS, and we are almost at the end of MapReduce and Yarn. So we need to compare what is the difference between Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2. So in Hadoop 1, we have only HDFS with name node and secondary name node. You don't have transparent failover or high availability when we compare HDFS with HDFS2. Whereas in HDFS2, we have high availability, we have HDFS federation, which will actually not only provides failover, but also it can provide high availability and failover. It can also provide something called load balancing using a concept called HDFS federation. But don't worry about HDFS federation. It is not typically configured on small to medium sized clusters, even to large size clusters. Very large size clusters in companies like Yahoo and few technology companies, they will use HDFS federation. It provides the capability of having multiple name nodes to support your cluster. No need to worry about that at this time. Only focus on HDFS high availability as the major difference between HDFS and HDFS2. And when it comes to MapReduce and Yarn, MapReduce as execution framework takes care of both cluster resource management as well as job management or data processing. Job management or data processing means same here. Whereas in Hadoop 2, MapReduce and resource management and data processing are decoupled. Resource manager is taken care by Yarn, and data processing is taken care by MapReduce. And if you want to use other tools in the same cluster, there is no easy way to use centralized tool with Hadoop 1, whereas in Hadoop 2, you can actually configure other tools also, like we have done with MapReduce, to use Yarn for the resource management of the cluster. So these are the major differences. You need to understand this slide to compare and contrast between Hadoop 1 and Hadoop 2. Okay. So this I determine how yarn handles resource allocations. So I have already covered that. So you have to understand the parameters which are related to that. First, you have to set yarn level parameters, especially the node manager resource memory MB. Okay. So again, I am reviewing the blog which I have discussed earlier. Okay, here. Search for yarn tuning and it will understand, it will give all the details and use the document to determine what should be given to node manager resource memory MB. This is the most important parameter and it will tell how much memory should be given for node manager. Okay, so we need to we need to read, so from the available memory, if it is 64 GB or 128 GB or 256 GB, you have to allocate some memory for OS. You have to allocate some memory for Ambari agent or Cloudera agent. You have to allocate memory for data node, node manager, and if there are any other services running on the cluster, you have to keep those things also in mind. After allocating or keeping memory aside for all those things, then whatever value remains, you have to use that memory to actually determine the node manager resource memory. Okay, and then for each container in the downstream tools, whatever memory range you want to give, you can specify using this minimum and maximum allocation MB and minimum and maximum allocation cores. And then when it comes to setting up the memory and CPUs for MapReduce to use on top of yarn, you have to give MapReduce map memory and MapReduce reduce memory MB within this range. They both can have different values. Typically reducers will have more memory and because in reducers we perform sorting and all those things which requires lot more memory than map tasks. So those things has to be given in these parameters. Okay, so map memory and reduce memory both have to fall within this range, and then even vcores should fall within this range, and based upon that, the number of containers that can be run on the cluster will be determined on the fly. Okay, what happened? Yeah, tuning. Yeah, this is the blog. So make sure you download or you save it somewhere because they might change it in future. The URL might not work in future. Okay, so this is read through the entire thing. This is the one of the best blogs I have seen when it comes to capacity planning or tuning the Hadoop clusters using yarn. Read through entire thing multiple times and make sure you understand this blog in detail. Then you will definitely your knowledge on managing the clusters will go to the next level or one level higher. Okay, so this is how we actually allocate the memory settings. And now let's compare with compare MRV1 and MRV2. I am re-emphasizing and trying to provide this information in multiple dimensions, so it becomes intuitive to you. Because this is the most important aspect of Hadoop administration for day-to-day operations. Setting up the cluster is very straightforward. You have wizards, it will take no time. Capacity planning and then managing the cluster, fine-tuning the cluster over time requires this in-depth knowledge. Okay, so when it comes to MRV1, the master is job tracker, MRV2 RER, the master is resource manager. Especially there are lot of migrations going on from classic to yarn. So if you claim that you already have done before, then these are the things which should become intuitive to you. You should not think to tell the differences between MR1 or MRV2, and you can actually write a cover letter that you have done the migration, and as part of the interview that will become a discussion about how to migrate, and then you will be able to easily crack the interview. If you do not prepare the cover letter based upon the requirement, then it will be more of a grilling by the interviewer to you rather than making it as a discussion. So keep this in mind. Try to understand the job description and try to write a good cover letter based on your experience, so that the interview can become a discussion when you face it. Okay. Anyway, coming back to this, masters are job tracker for MRV1 and resource manager for YARN. Slave will be task tracker and it will be running on each node in MRV1, and here it will be node manager. Job tracker controls life cycle of the job, or makes sure takes care of job management. Per job application master, this is the very important thing. Per job application master will take over the data processing or job management for each of the job, and it is transient in nature and will be cleaned up after job is completed. So once the job is completed earlier, the application master URL to get the logs is changed to history. Application URL is changed to history because the application master is dead, and the process will not be running anymore in the backend, and you will not be able to fetch the logs. That's why the logs are copied to job history, and application master URL is changed to history in that resource manager web interface for that job. And then mappers and reducers, task tracker will manage the process that runs tasks, mappers and reducers. Containers will manage the process that runs tasks and mappers and reducers. Again, containers are transient in nature and will be cleaned up when the job is completed, and these containers will be managed by node manager, whereas directly mappers and reducers will be managed by task trackers in Classic. And also in Classic, tasks for mappers and reducers on each node are pre-configured and cannot be changed. It can cause underutilization of resources. So if you recollect this one as part of the discussion when I spoken about Classic, if you go to these parameters, so there are parameters such as this: map rate task tracker, map tasks maximum, map rate task tracker, reduce tasks maximum, which will determine the number of mappers and reducers, and you will pre-allocate those things. If you have 24 cores, you will give 16 to mappers and 8 to reducers, or 12 to mappers or 12 to reducers. And if you give, let's say 16 and 8, and all the jobs you are running are map only jobs, then the capacity which is allocated to reducers are wasted when it comes to Classic. So to overcome that, in YARN they have taken care, the memory allocations are done as explained earlier using using the ranges, and then at the map reduce level by setting the memory settings, the number of tasks are determined dynamically. Okay, and in some cases we will even run some of the map reduce jobs with different memory settings for mappers and reducers, and some others with different memory settings. That also we can do using YARN, which is not possible with Classic. Classic mappers and reducers are predetermined. Scalability, job tracker is single point of failure and probability is high, as job tracker controls performs both job management and also resource management. Historically, it has many issues with clusters, more than 4,000 nodes. Even with fewer nodes, YARN is becoming the standard because it can work with other technologies also, not just MapReduce. Even for the larger nodes, if you want for resource manager, you can actually configure high availability, and also even without high availability, resource manager will be relatively stable because it performs only resource management. Job management is done by application master, and this is already taken care. So before getting into the scheduling jobs, let me know if you have any questions on HDFS or Classic or YARN. Then we will get into the scheduling jobs. Okay, so let us go to the scheduling jobs. So first let me delete that directory which is taking a lot of storage. random text writer. So in production clusters, you can actually run this job to generate the random text. It will test the cluster effectively, but after that you should terminate it or delete the directory, because it is generating 10 GB for each node. So if you have 100 nodes in a cluster, it will generate 1 terabyte of data with replication factor 3. You will be wasting 3 terabytes of capacity, which is not good. So once you validated the cluster thoroughly by running this random text writer job, you can actually terminate it or delete it using Hadoop fs-rm-r and give the directory. The files will be deleted. Okay. Now I will get into the schedulers. So right now, when I run this job, I will be running the same job again. Let me first make sure that I have enough capacity. Even though it is deleted, it will be in trash and it can cause issues. Okay, again you should run df command. One minute, okay. Resume in Movavi. Okay, so now we are good. So let me run the df command to make sure what is the free space on this cluster. So it is still showing 99.5 gigabytes used. Oh my god. So I need to expunge. Anyway, I have still 144.6 gigabytes of storage. So let me DFS used, non-DFS used, remaining. Okay. Why it is showing okay, out of 144 available is only 18, so I have to delete this. Let me do this. Sudo -u hdfs hadoop fs expunge. Okay, how to take care of this? Hadoop fs-help expunge. And there are no other options. So let me Google it. This is pain. Actually, I should have ran the word count job on this. That would have been better. Google. Not working. Okay, Hadoop fs-df u-s-h user ec2-user. I think because I have configured high availability, there seems to be some issue. Okay. Okay, sudo -u hdfs hadoop fs expunge hdfs balancer sudo -u hdfs fs balancer. Okay, let me do this. Go to HDFS, get the active name node. It's 38. So let me go to that node. SSH ec2-user at Hadoop fs expunge. At least if I would not have moved to trash, let me see if I can restore from trash. Restore data from trash. If it did not work out, then I will cover the concepts today and I will try to execute it later. Okay, Hadoop fs ls /user/ec2 hyphen user slash dot trash. Nothing is there here. Okay. Okay, Hadoop fs hyphen mv, copy this location to slash user slash ec2 hyphen user random text. You can just say this one. Okay, now it is moved. Now I will run word count job on this. User ec2 hyphen user and hit enter. Make sure random text writer is here and it has files. Okay, so it has files. So now let me start doing the whiteboarding, and first I will explain the first one, FIFO scheduler. FIFO scheduler will not be used in production environments. Even in development environments, no one uses FIFO scheduler. It's only to learn, to set up the clusters and practice MapReduce. It is the default scheduler, but default scheduler in Apache Hadoop. When it comes to the distributions, phase scheduler is default for Cloudera and capacity scheduler is default for Hortonworks. Okay, that you can confirm what type of scheduler by going to the parameter files. Okay, so I am going to Chrome here and then Ambari, and the schedulers is the concept of yarn or classic. So let's we have only yarn on this Hortonworks cluster, and you can go to configs, and in configs you can search for scheduler. Okay, and if you click on advanced here, so the interface between Cloudera and here it will be different. So you can see the which scheduler it is using by looking at the class name. Okay, so this is the default scheduler for Ambari, but you can use phase scheduler also in Ambari. Similarly, in Hortonworks, the default is phase scheduler, but you can use capacity scheduler also, as long as you understand the concepts and how it works. For Apache Hadoop, out of the box, it is FIFO scheduler. So let's start with FIFO scheduler. So instead of whiteboarding, let me open a spreadsheet. That will be better. Okay, Excel. So you have this one. Okay, and here let's say our cluster capacity is let's say we have a 4-node cluster and our total cluster capacity is 32. Okay, so let's say you ran a job such as word count. So first let me run word count program here. Hadoop jar. So word count takes 2 parameters, not one. Input path as well as output path. Input path is the directory random text writer, and output path is user ec2 hyphen user word count. Okay, that will be my output path. And if I hit enter, it will start processing the data. Because we have too much of data, let me only give few files part-m, because I don't have much of capacity on the cluster. We have 30 files. So part m0000 to 29, because when we ran the random text writer, it ran 30 mappers to generate this data, 10 on each node in the cluster, as I have 3 node cluster, 3 slave node cluster. And you can see that each of the file is around 1 GB. So total it's 30 GB data. Because of the replication factor, it is taking up 90 GB storage. So in this, I will only process 20 to 29. Okay, that I can give the patterns like this. I hope it will work. If it does not work, I will run on everything, or I will run only on one file. Okay, and now I run the MapReduce job. So I am actually, okay, it is not working. So I will run on everything. It is not taking the pattern here. Typically, when we develop when the developers in the company develop MapReduce application, they will take care of patterns also. Okay. So now the random text writer job is running. So it has 30 input process, but it is taking 270 splits because the block size is 128 MB. These 30 GB files have 270 blocks in HDFS. Hence, it is creating 270 splits. So these 270 splits will be processed by 270 mappers. That one you can confirm by using this URL and going to Firefox. Okay, so I have started that job around 7:10. Around 7:10. So it's a job 1, or let me give the job ID itself. Job ID is this one. Okay, and if you click on this job, it will tell you how many mappers and how many reducers it required to execute this one. Come on. Okay, here you can see this job requires 270 mappers, and it is only using one reducer to do the word count letter. So this job will actually fail as part of the reducer phase, because it will try to do too much of stuff, but that is fine. So here you can see the total capacity that is required for this job is 270 till the mappers are completed. Once the mappers are completed, then only the reducers will actually doing the work. So as long as the mappers started completing, reducers will start doing some job, but reducers will only complete after all the mappers are completed. Until then, not even one reducer will be in completed state. It might be get into 80%, 90% state, but it will not be in completed state. Anyway, for now, this job requires 271 task capacity. So required capacity is, it started at 7:10 AM. Required capacity is 270 for mappers. Let's take care of mappers only for now. Ignore reducers for now. So we need 270, and our cluster capacity is overall 12. Okay. One is going for application master. So beyond application master, including application master, at any point in time it can only run 12. That's why everything is being used now. That's why you are seeing 11 running, and these are map tasks and one for application master. So the entire cluster capacity. So what is this 32? Actually, our cluster capacity is only 12, not 32. Okay, so the entire cluster capacity being used by this job, and so let me fill these things. Delete. Job ID. Start time. So at 10 it has started. Okay. total mappers. Let's assume that the job is only map only job, so that it is clearer. And here you have to insert pending. So when it actually starts, all the 270 will be in pending state, and running state will be in 0, and completed state will be in 0. Okay, but once the the job starts processing the data, this will change. Okay, so here let's say around 7:10 itself, the status started changing. So until it reaches the available capacity, at this time it's plain slate. Okay, as it is plain slate, let me application master 1. Okay, available capacity 12. So at the beginning of the job, available capacity is 12. Application master took 1 and running is 0. Okay, so at 7:10, when actually it starts processing the data, the running will slowly go up to 11, and then pending will slowly come down from 270 to 259. Okay, it will be progressive. It will not be immediately. It means it will submit one task at a time, and by the time it completes the capacity, it will keep on increasing the number of tasks in running state until the capacity is reached. Okay, and completed will be 0 here. Application master is 1. Available capacity will be 0 because the entire capacity is being used. So here it should be only 11, not 12. Okay, so let me add one more thing. Total capacity is 12. Okay, so here this will not change. Total capacity will remain same. Okay, so after a while, after a couple of minutes, these jobs will be changing to completed. Some of the tasks for the job will be changing to completed. Let's say at 7:12, let's say approximately 2 minutes is being taken for each task to complete. So at 7:12, most of these 11 tasks that are in running will be changed to complete. So total mappers that are required is 270. Pending will change to 248. So first let us start with completed, then we'll come back to pending. So 11 are completed. Application master will still be 1. Okay, as these are completed, slowly the pending ones will be changing to running. So as 11 are completed, now the running also can be 11 within a few seconds time, and pending will be 248. Okay, anytime when you add these three things, it will add up to the mappers plus reducers that are running for that job. Okay, in this case we are only considering it as a map only job, so we are considering that it is taking 270 map tasks, and these pending plus running plus completed will be equal to the total tasks. Let me name it as tasks rather than mappers. Okay, so like that it will slowly completing the job. Okay, again this will remain as 0, this will remain as 12. So now this is with respect to one job. Even with respect to one job also, we are actually submitting a job beyond the capacity of the cluster, but using this pending, running and completed, slowly it is completing the tasks, and eventually once all the 270 tasks are completed using this 12 capacity cluster, 12 task capacity cluster, the job will be completed. Okay, so this is with respect to one job. Now let us say you want to submit another job while this job is running. Okay, so when you actually submit another job while this job is running, if that's where the schedulers comes into picture. When multiple jobs or multiple applications are being run on the cluster, those have to be scheduled so that everyone can get can effectively use the resources and complete the job. So let's say now let's take the scenario of FIFO scheduler. Okay, with FIFO scheduler, if I submit another job which require, let's say, 10 tasks, so approximately at 7:15, let's say I submit another job called 0004 itself, and 7:15 is the start time. Okay, let me insert one more record here. Let's say by 7:15 for this job, um, 40 tasks are completed. So let's start from here. 40 tasks are completed, and 11 will be still be running at 7:15 when this 4 is submitted, and pending will be 40 plus 11, 51, so 219 will be pending. Okay, and rest of the stuff will be same, and you have submitted additional job at that time. So for discussion sake, let's say that by the time this job is submitted, there is some available capacity. So not all are running. Okay, so there will be some gap between the tasks being moved to completed and other tasks being moved from pending to running. There will be some gap. So let's say 40 are completed, only 9 are running. So 49, so 221 are pending. So available capacity will be 2. So this will be 221. Okay. So even though there is a available capacity of 2 at this time when this job is submitted, while for job 3, the tasks are moving from pending to running, the resources will not be allocated to this. That's why it is called as FIFO scheduler. So whatever job submitted first will get all the resources until the required capacity to process further tasks is less than the overall capacity of the cluster. So here at 7:15, total tasks are 270, pending tasks are 221, running are 9, completed are 40, and available capacity is 2. And we submitted the job 0004 at 7:15, which requires, let's say, 10 tasks. Okay, then 10 will be pending. All the 10 will be pending. Actually, 10 plus 1, 11 will be pending because it has to submit the application master also. Application master itself will take 1 task on the cluster, and 0 will be running and 0 will be running. Application master will be 0 here. So okay, and then available capacity for this will be 0, and total capacity will not change. Total capacity will remain same all the time. Okay, so the main drawback of FIFO scheduler is until the jobs submitted earlier are completed, the subsequent jobs are completed, or the required capacity to complete that job has to be less than the overall capacity of the cluster. So let's say it took 1 hour and take the time of 8:15 instead of 7:15. At 8:15, total tasks will be 270 for the first job. So here I am talking about this job, and let's the 2. So 1 will be gone to application master, and let's say 260 are completed by that time. So sometimes multiple jobs will be completed at the same time. So let's say by 8:15 the completed are 260. So pending will be 0 and running will be 8. or even if pending are there, let's say there are 2 pending, and yeah, this is fine. 2 are pending, and running are 8. Okay, available capacity will be, so 8 are being, so what is the total capacity? 12. So 8 plus 1 are running. So 3. So there can be 3 tasks that can run at this time, because 260 of the 270 are completed already, 2 are pending, and 8 are running. Okay, and then total capacity is the same. So for this job, for at this time 8:15, which requires 10 tasks. Okay, so now even though 8 plus 1 for application master, and 8 for the actual tasks for the job are running, still there is 3 available capacity. Even though there is 3 available capacity, as there are still 2 jobs that are pending, so 2 tasks that are pending for this job, okay, still all the tasks will be pending here. Okay, because if you add these 2, 8 plus 2, running plus pending, okay, it takes up 10, and then 1 for application master. So 11 tasks are required for this job. So even at this time, even though there available capacity of 3, because there are 2 tasks that are still pending for the job 3, at this time it cannot delegate any resources for the tasks for 4. So running will be 0 and completed will be 0. Application master will be started, because first thing which will happen is the application master. Okay, so here the available capacity for the other ones is only 1, not 3, because still there are 2 pending here, and this application master will take up this task, hence it will become 0. So now you have 8 running from here, 2 are waiting, 2 tasks can be created for this job, because still there are 2 pending, and 1 is waiting, 1 is running for the application master, and total capacity is 12. So immediately this will be turned into running, because there is still 2 capacity to convert this pending to running. So it will take up the resources and it will be completed. Once it started completed, so let me take this one, copy this entire thing here, and let's talk about 8:16. Okay, and now let's say it has completed 1 more task. Okay, so running will be, let's say running are still 8. 261, sorry, 8 plus 1 9, plus 1 10, plus 1 11. So there will be 1 task available for this one, so that can make it this one 9 and this one 1. Okay, and now this job actually started processing the data at 8:16, even though the job is submitted at 7:15. So the main drawback of FIFO scheduler is, once a larger job started, if it takes 4 hours, 5 hours, 1 day, all the subsequent jobs have to wait until it actually the capacity required to so the number of tasks that are in pending plus running state for that task is less than the overall capacity of the cluster. Other jobs will not get the share to execute their tasks and process the data. So that is the drawback of the FIFO scheduler, and those drawbacks are addressed using capacity scheduler and phase scheduler. So capacity scheduler, the way they do is they create multiple queues. So I will again demonstrate that as part of the next class. So they create queues, okay, and each queue, so they create queues such as 1 minute, I will show you right away. Let me use this one. HDPCA. So if you go to this certification, and scroll. So this is you need to understand the scheduler a little bit for the certification also. If you go to this document, capacity scheduler is default in Hortonworks. Phase scheduler is default in Cloudera. So if you want to understand capacity scheduler, if you refer Hortonworks documentation, it will be far more clearer. If you go through Cloudera documentation, it will be clumsy and confusing. So if you want to understand capacity scheduler, go to Hortonworks documentation. If you want to understand phase scheduler, because it is default in Cloudera, they have well documented about phase scheduler over there. So each one have their own agenda here. Okay. So the main concept in capacity scheduler is multiple queues rather than one. Okay. In FIFO scheduler, there is only one queue and everything will be waiting in that queue. Whereas in capacity scheduler, for each department you will have a queue, and for each queue you will define the capacity in a file called capacity scheduler.xml. Okay. So here they are saying there is a root and then there are multiple queues in that: support, engineering and marketing. And again within support, engineering and marketing, there are sub queues, like support have training and services, engineering have development and QA, marketing have sales and advertising. Okay. So here this is how you will define. You have to give root queues parameter, and you have to tell what are the queues you are trying to create using this capacity scheduler. Okay. So there is root queue, and then within the support queue I want to create training and services. So child queues under support are defined here. Similarly, development QA for engineering, and sales and advertising for marketing. Okay. So once those queues are defined, you will actually give the capacity to each of the queue in a parameter file called capacity scheduler.xml that you can access multiple ways. Okay. One is through Ambari. Go to Ambari, but you should update only through Ambari, but you can get this information through command line or Ambari. And here if you see, this is the place where you need to update the details about the queue capacity. Okay. So these are by percentage. So here I have only one queue and I am giving the entire queue for root itself. Hence everything will be running same as FIFO scheduler when the jobs are submitted here. But once you organize the queues like this, you can define the capacity for each of the queue. And for example, development engineering team might be running more MapReduce jobs than other two departments. Then you can give 50% capacity to that, and all the jobs which will be submitted under that can be again divided into development and QA. For development you might give 10%, for QA you might give 20%, and for production you might give 70%. So all the jobs that needs to be run in development will only use the 50% of 10% of the 50% capacity, because at the engineering level we have given 50% capacity. Again within that we are dividing. Again within the production, if you want to create a queue for small jobs and a queue for bigger jobs, you can do that. So that's how you can plan using the same FIFO scheduler. By using the capacity scheduler as a wrapper on top of it, you can manage the resources in a better manner. One drawback with capacity scheduler is, let's say you have 1000 task capacity, means 1000 tasks can run simultaneously, and you have given 25% to support, 50% to engineering, and 25% to marketing. So let's say you don't have much jobs for marketing. So which means that 250 will be given to support, 500 tasks will be given to engineering, and 250 will be given to marketing. Let's say there are no jobs running on marketing, which means that 250 capacity is wasted. Okay, because those will be pre-allocated, and that capacity will be wasted. So that is one drawback in capacity scheduler. It might not use the entire capacity when you are using capacity scheduler, but you can actually distinguish jobs related to a particular team or particular application in a different queue to make sure that that application or jobs will not be impacted with the long running jobs of the other non-related applications. So this will work very well for multi-tenancy compared to FIFO scheduler. Okay, so that is about capacity scheduler. Go through this documentation, go through the XML files, and so if you go through the capacity scheduler.xml file, you will see the exact details in XML format on the browser, and the location, on the command terminal, and the location for that is, I am killing this job. It will not be killed, it will still be running in the background, but I got the control back so that I can show you cd etc hadoop const. So this is the location, and here if you have capacity scheduler, you will find capacity scheduler.xml. If you have phase scheduler, you will find phase scheduler.xml. So if you look into this file, you can see all the parameters that are visible in the Ambari. Okay, so this is about capacity scheduler. So any questions about capacity scheduler or FIFO scheduler? Within the queue of the capacity scheduler, again the same logic which I have explained for FIFO will be applied. Now if you don't have any questions, we will move on to phase scheduler. Again, this scheduler is also very important from multiple aspects about Hadoop administration. So these are the things which will actually matter. Setting up the cluster is very straightforward. Once you practice 3-4 times, you will be able to get it. But these are the things which you need to understand to support the cluster effectively. Okay, so I think you don't have any questions. Let's go to phase scheduler. Let me start I have a single node machine in AWS, so I'm connecting to my AWS account. Yeah, let me use Firefox for this. I am stopping tunneling. This is not required anymore, and disabling Foxy proxy here, because if you use Foxy proxy, it will make it little bit slower. All the internet traffic has to go through AWS layer to get. When you actually enable Foxy proxy and SSH tunneling, all your network traffic will channel through the AWS layer, which will make the other browsing aspects slower. For that reason, if you don't require, stop SSH tunneling and stop Foxy proxy. Okay, so I am logging in now. Go to EC2. So I don't need these things, so I will wait. Okay, I will shut it down later because I have to pay almost $2 to $3 every hour for this cluster, for each of this cluster which is up and running. So for explaining these things to you, if I bring up in every class for 2 hours, which will be 40 hours, 80 hours, it will cost me approximately $300 just to demonstrate. That's why I am thinking of stopping administration course from next time. I will be focusing on big data engineer course plus development. Even the audience is very thin for the administration course. Okay, anyway. So this single node cluster is being started, and let me use this IP address and go to browser and start the Cloudera Manager. MapRed job list. MapRed job kill. Let me kill this and stop this. It is not required anymore. I have already covered all the important concepts. I will shut these things down. It does. Okay, it still did not come up. The single node cluster, why it did not come up? Let me 86.110.32. 86.110.32. It will take some time. Let's wait until it comes up. CentOS. Oh, not CentOS. Root. Okay. Telnet. Localhost 7180. Service Cloudera SCM server status. It's running. Yeah, now it came up. Okay, now it will work. Okay, now I am logging in. So the main difference between phase scheduler and capacity scheduler is, so now I am explaining the phase scheduler. Okay, so take the same example. When the job is submitted from 7 to 7:12, it behaves the same way. There will be no difference in the behavior for one job, whether you are using phase scheduler with capacity scheduler. Yes, it does matter because unless all the 100% capacity is given to the queue, it will change a little bit here. So if the capacity is only 50%, which means that out of 12, the queue where this might be running will get only 6. Hence, there will be difference in the behavior for the capacity scheduler. I am not getting into the details here, but phase scheduler is significantly different from FIFO scheduler. So capacity internally uses FIFO only. The only thing is, instead of one queue, you will have multiple queues. Whereas with phase, it will try to delegate the resources to all the jobs running simultaneously. Okay. So here also there is a concept of pools, but I will not get into those details today. I will try to cover as part of the next class. So let's say there is no pool and all the 100% capacity is given to one pool. Okay. At 7:15, when the job is submitted, okay, here let's say this is the case with 3. Okay, so at this time when the 4 is submitted, it requires 10 capacity and we have 2 available capacity. So one will be given to application master immediately when the job is submitted, once it started running. So the pending will become 9. So it will not happen at the same time, but there will be very little lag as there is the available capacity of 2 at this time. The available capacity can be given to this one or this one, because both require the task to complete. So it can choose any one. So let's say it has chosen this one. It will not wait until all the tasks for the job 3 is completed, and completed will be 0 here. So this is the possible scenario with when it comes to phase scheduler. Now once you allocate this, once the tasks are allocated like this, the available capacity will become 0, total capacity will remain same. Okay, now at 7:16, I am copying all this thing here. Now at 7:16, 2 more are completed for this one. So let's delete these things. Okay, so in the 40, let's say 2 are completed. Okay, so once 2 are completed, now 2 tasks will be freed and will be moved to available capacity. So those 2 tasks, as the tasks are required by both the jobs running at the same time, those 2 tasks will be distributed for both. Okay, so the pending might be 0 still here for this pending completed might be 0 for the job 4, but for the 2 tasks that are completed for job 3 will be distributed between the 2. So here this will become 1. Okay, and then 1 plus 1 plus 1, 3 plus 9, 9 will come here. Okay, and then so 42 plus 9 is 51, so 219 will be pending tasks and 9 will be pending tasks here. Okay, so once 2 tasks for this job 3 are completed and made available to the cluster for the jobs, those 2 will be distributed for all the jobs that require the resources. If there are more than 2 jobs, then, and if only 2 are completed, then it will try to internally manage somehow to give whatever it choose. There are no hard and fast rules which one will be chosen, or we don't need to get into that level of details. Only thing you need to understand is phase scheduler will try to distribute the resources fairly for the new coming jobs, instead of keeping the jobs that are started later waiting until the jobs that are started earlier are close to complete. Okay, so this is at 7:16. Okay, again at 7:17, let's say 4 tasks of this is completed. So completed is, so let's say 3 of them are completed. So let me delete these 4, we will fill these things later. So let's say 3 of these are completed, so 45 are completed. Let's say 1 is completed here. So now we have 4 tasks which can be allocated to the jobs that are available. Again, those 4 will be equally distributed between the both the jobs that are running at that time. So 2 will be running here, and here it will be 8. Okay, and if you add these 2 and also these 2, 8 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1, 12, which is the total capacity of our cluster. So 2 of them are being spent for application master. Now these one for this job 7 will be pending, and 53, which means 2 out of 270, 53 are being running, so 217 will be in the pending state. Okay, so 217 plus 8, 225 plus 45, 270. So now at 720, take the same example. At 720. Okay, now let's say almost 8 tasks are completed, because it's the time has moved quite a bit and 8 tasks are completed. So most likely, let's say those 8 tasks are 2 from this job and 6 from this one. So let us delete these things. So as 6 are completed from this one, 51 will be completed for this, and 3 are completed for this. Okay, so now we will have 6 capacity which can be distributed, 6 tasks which can be distributed. So most likely this will get 3, and 3 plus 1 plus 1, 5 are completed, and this one will get 7. Okay, always when you add the tasks that are running plus application masters, it should be equal to the total capacity of the cluster. So now 51 plus 7, 58 are running, which means that 12 are the pending ones, and 3 are completed and 3 are running, which means that 4 are pending. So most likely by 725, following this pattern, this job will be completed, and this one will be keep on running until all the tasks are completed. But as it has delegated some of the tasks, some of the capacity for the other jobs, the overall execution of this job will be later than the time when we use FIFO capacity scheduler with full capacity. Okay, full capacity given to one queue. If there is only one queue, then capacity and FIFO schedulers are same. So phase scheduler can be slower than capacity or FIFO scheduler for the larger jobs, because the larger jobs will be so the resources relieved by the larger job after completing the tasks will be distributed across multiple jobs that are running at that time by the phase scheduler. So phase scheduler means it will try to give the resources fairly to all the jobs that are running at a particular point in time. So this is about schedulers. If you have any questions, let me know. Now we will go to this one. Let us start. So this is a single node lab I have. So I am using this one to actually demonstrate about capacity scheduler. To understand capacity scheduler, phase scheduler, you don't need to have a multi-node cluster. Main thing is you need to understand what is the class name that is part of the scheduler class, and what is the XML file name, and what are the important parameters that can be viewed from a single node cluster. Even using Cloudera Quickstart VM, you will be able to determine this one. In this case, we are talking about yarn. So click on yarn, go to configuration, and search for scheduler. And here you can see that the default scheduler is phase scheduler. If you want to change, you can click on these things to either FIFO or capacity scheduler. And here one minute, this is for the, if you use capacity scheduler, all that capacity scheduler.xml, some of the parameters are important. That's why they have created this, but these parameters will only be in effect if you choose capacity scheduler. Okay, for phase scheduler, right now there is no XML file here. We are already on the host, cd etc Hadoop conf, and the XML file might not be as important as the, so when it comes to capacity scheduler, the XML file for defining the capacity of capacity for different queues is very important. That's why you see the capacity scheduler.xml file. But for phase scheduler, the phase scheduler.xml file is not that important. You don't define pools for most of the cases. But if you want to define those, you have to create a XML file and you have to punch in over here. So to understand what all parameters you have, you can say Cloudera phase scheduler.xml or Cloudera phase scheduler. Go to resource management and go through this documentation. Here, phase scheduler for CDH5. This is the one which you need to look into. So they are actually redirecting you to the Apache documentation. So if you want to define the pools and all, then you have to use these things, use these parameters. So it is not important for you at this time to explore in detail about phase scheduler, but slowly when you start setting up the cluster, you have to understand these parameters in detail, how it will behave and all those things. Whatever knowledge you gain so far as part of the class is more than enough to get started with these things. Okay, so these are the phase scheduler parameters, and these can be either placed in the answer.xml or you can create a different XML file. I think you have to enter these things only to yarn. Let me see. View answer site.xml and phase. So for phase scheduler, you typically will not have a different XML file like the case in capacity scheduler. So these are the parameters which you might have to review to get into further details about phase scheduler. Okay, so if you want to add more parameters that are already there in phase scheduler, you have to use this phase scheduler advanced configuration snippet, and you have to give properties using XML syntax. So you should not. So sometimes when you use Cloudera, you might not have all the parameters as part of the XML files. You might have to add yourself. So the way you add the custom parameters is by using this concept called safety valves. Okay. Similarly for Ambari, if you want to add new parameters, okay, I killed it. It is very straightforward. You have to go to advanced tab. I have another cluster. Let me show you. CloudX Lab. Let me show you how to add custom parameters using Ambari. Okay. Lab credentials, go to Ambari. Copy this one. So always you should use only the web interfaces when the cluster is managed by these distributions. You should not modify any properties directly in the XML files. Okay, now I am inside this one, and here if you go to MapReduce 2 and if you want to modify the parameters, go to advanced. I'm just giving you an example how you can actually add new parameters. Go to custom. Okay, here we don't have permissions, that's why it is not showing up. If you have permissions to add, here you can just add property name and values, and they will be updated in the appropriate XML files. For custom MapRed, it will be updating MapRed site.xml. Similarly, if you go to yarn, if you go to advanced, there will be options to actually enter custom parameters for each of these things. So custom answer.xml, you have to click on this and you have to add properties and values, and those will be preserved in the answer.xml file. Whereas in Cloudera, the concept is called safety valve. Okay, so you have to provide properties using appropriate syntax here. It's not name and value like the way in Ambari. Here you have to actually provide as per the syntax. If it is XML, And if you want to add a property, you have to, it should like, sorry, it should look like this. Okay, and if it is log4j properties, whatever syntax we use in log4j.properties file should be used to actually provide those custom parameters using safety value. Safety value is the concept proprietary to Cloudera to actually add new parameters that are not available in the existing XML files while for our clusters. Okay, so that's about the schedulers. Very important concept. You need to understand the differences fairly well between FIFO, FAIR and capacity for the certification exam. And also while working on the project, you need to understand, you should not use FIFO scheduler at all. Between FAIR scheduler and capacity scheduler, FAIR scheduler is default for Cloudera and capacity scheduler is default for Hortonworks. You need to understand the features or capabilities of the two and the limitations, and then depending upon your requirements you might have to switch between non-default ones so that the cluster is used effectively. Okay, so you need to understand the behavior of the jobs that are running on your cluster, and you have to take necessary action based upon the type of applications that are running on the cluster. Okay, so for exercise, so you need to understand what are the daemon process for MRV1 as well as MRV2 plus yarn. You need to identify different parameter files. You need to understand difference between the classic and yarn, understand important parameters and relevance of the parameters in capacity planning as well as performance tuning. I have covered all those things in detail. Interview questions typically can be these things: what are different daemon process or background process, what is application master with respect to yarn, what is default port number of resource manager UI, it is 8088, yes 8088, and what are different types of schedulers. And when they ask this question, what are different types of schedulers, you should get into the details. You should not just say FIFO, FAIR and capacity. You should at least either ask these are the ones. If you want to get into, if you want me to get into the details, I can get into the details. You should, if you add the statement, it will make the difference. Even if the question is straightforward, what are different types of schedulers, the intention of the interviewer might be the differences also. So you should convert that into a discussion that will make the difference in the overall interview process. You should say there are three types of schedulers: FIFO, capacity and FAIR, and FIFO is the default one, but it will be used only in the development purposes. For production purposes or for actual projects, if it is Cloudera distribution, default is we should use FAIR or capacity scheduler. For Cloudera distributions, FAIR scheduler is default. For the Hortonworks distribution, capacity scheduler is default. If you want further details about the differences of these things, I can get into those also. Then the interview will go to the next level. Okay, the interview will slowly become a discussion rather than grilling you on technical aspects or syntaxes, semantics, etc. Okay, so keep that in mind. So we will be using the same learning pattern going forward for all the other tools like Hive, Pig, Scoop, etc. We'll look at the architecture, we'll look into the daemon process, we'll look into the parameter files, log files and validation by running by validating the service level as well as the whether the service is working as expected or not. All those things will be taken care for each and every component in the Hadoop ecosystem, which we will be covering as part of next I think 5 or 6 classes are remaining, so all those things will be covered. From here, every class 1 or 2 tools will be covered. So Hive will be the one of the bigger one, and Spark will be the other bigger one. Rest of the rest of the topics are very small. In some classes, we will be covering 2-3 topics also. Okay. So that being said, let me know if you have any questions. There are only 2 people attended for this session. If you don't have, I will close the session for today. And make sure you practice. If you don't practice, you will not be able to remember these things, and you will quickly lose the track of this, and then you will get bored to listen. Okay then, thank you, bye.